If you're alone, there must be something wrong with you, right? Look, hey, maybe you're too depressed to socialize, right? Is it ADHD? Have you lost your tongue? It's your generation. Looking at that goddamn screen all day, every day, you lost your touch with reality. Goddamn TikTok video. Of course you would lose your interest in real people. Maybe you should start a dopamine diet this Monday. Wouldn't even work. You grew up with an iPad after all. Your brain must have adapted to the virtual reality. Then it's not your problem. It's this goddamn modern life. Kids are left home alone all day. And of course, fatherless America. I knew that. The mothers are single nowadays. All the mothers are single. Goddamn, that's so bad. There are buildings, there are skyscrapers. Oh, we used to play with the kids in our neighborhood all day. Don't worry, don't panic. I understand you. Unfortunately, real friendship like this is dead. And the humanity is dying with it. This is where anxiety is presented as wisdom. Yes, this is me. It's been a while and I was working on it.
Today we uncover the causes of the loneliness epidemic.
This is a problem that has been building for decades.
I don't have friends.
It's been a very debilitating.
Considered shy, a loner.
The World Health Organization declared loneliness a global health concern.
I just feel so lonely.
Ironically, you are not alone in this.
And still 16%.
It's been 5 years since I had friends.
Some countries have even appointed ministers for loneliness.
It feels like they have no one to talk to.
All I ever have wanted is people in my life and friendships.
And as the world has moved faster and faster, as things have changed so much, as we shifted from in-person to online, taking a toll on our relationship.
Well, that sounds seriously frightening, and the reason is because it is.
In the 20th century, making friends was an important issue. People were ready to pay for books and courses that teach them how to make friends. People joined in for clubs, for language learning, instrument playing, and learning some new hobbies and skills just to make new friends. I personally remember the late 20th century, 1990s, when personal computers were introduced to our lives. They weren't cheap enough for everybody to buy, but instead there were internet cafes everywhere. On every street there was an internet cafe. And people used to spend a lot of time and money on these internet cafes where they could find a personal computer that they can use. They were public but commercial. I remember not only the kids but also the adults went there, and the population was almost equal. But unlike kids, adults used the personal computers to talk to people using chat messengers. With all the technological advancements since then, personal computers getting into everybody's house, becoming cheap, and with everybody having a personal mobile phone that they can use all the time, whenever and wherever they want, you would expect communication to be rampant, that everybody were making a lot of friends everywhere. But it didn't work that way. Instead, it worked the other way around. The million-dollar question today is not how to make friends, but why to make friends. I don't mean there are no reasons. I mean, there are a plethora of them. The problem is they are too technical. If you are alienated in the people around you and the concept of friendship, none of those reasons can spark an encouragement. Notice that none of these are about how great friendships are, but rather how awful and dangerous loneliness is. As the popular song 7 Year went, once I was 7 years old, my mama told me, go make yourself some friends or you'll be lonely. We don't eat because we are afraid to be starved. We eat because eating is fun and satisfying. However, when you look at all these reasons that are supposed to glorify friendship, no matter how on point they are not motivating enough. In fact, what they might end up doing is making a lonely person even more alienated.
So I don't want people around me. I don't need anybody.
I don't have any pleasure in talking to anybody, but I should socialize and force myself into it, deny all my feelings, and ignore all the basic truth about who I am and how I want to live, just because being lonely increases my cortisol levels. That's it.
No, you alien. That also increases your risk of heart failure. Don't you know that? We tend to problematize it. I am lonely. This statement is never followed by "and cool with that," let alone "and proud." It's rather followed by "and depressed" or "and anxious" or with a simple "help me." Contrary to the older generations who felt secure in the company of others and uncanny when lonely, the latest generations experience loneliness as comfort and social encounters as a challenge. Nowadays, people openly say that they'd rather talk to a chatbot, an AI, rather than a person. Studies show that despite the old common sense that says AI could never take place of human-to-human interaction, it actually is taking its place. The emergence of social chatbots, however, is not the reason why friendships are dying, but rather a result of it. The data that showed that the younger generations are not having as much sex as their older counterparts, despite all the changes in people's attitude towards sexual activity and all the sexual revolution that went on, was quite shocking and disturbing to some. It turned out that the young people, although the society is not as conservative as they used to be, are not choosing to have an intimate relationship with a real person, but instead going for solitary sexual activities, such as masturbation and porn. The trend of satisfying human needs without human interaction is also there in the consumer behaviors. While online shopping is gradually replacing physical shopping, the physical stores are also replacing their human staff with machines. Since the epidemic, we came to conclusion the whole reason why we hadn't worked at home without seeing anybody else was because there wasn't enough technical infrastructure before. And when that setback was dealt, the concept of workmates and classmates also became obsolete. We have come to an epoch in our history where we can go on and on without seeing a single person. All these facts are coming up with a warning that says we have to do something about this. The idea that loneliness is horrible is left unchallenged. We cannot be okay with loneliness. And if we can, then we shouldn't be. We must do something about this loneliness epidemic, because friendship is good and important, and humans are social creatures, and belonging to a society is...
The man who walks alone is not lost, nor is he incomplete. He does not walk because he has been cast out, nor because he rejects the world, but because he has chosen to move beyond it.
Interacting with others could have a very beneficial effect on us, but could have a very bad effect on us. And yet everyone wants us to believe that we need to work together. Community is the natural state. Everyone wants us to adopt a herd mentality.
And the final line of defense: AI can't replace human connection. What's so sacred about human connection? Judgment? Projection? Power dynamics wrapped in concern?
Can it just be that maybe we are losing our attachment muscles because loneliness doesn't pose a threat to our survival anymore? Coming back to my food analogy, if we come to a point where we don't need a single bite in order to feel satisfied in terms of nutrition, would we still find eating a satisfying and fun experience? Or do we begin seeing it as a suboptimal, repetitive and boring task? What about our kids, What about their kids? After giving up its necessary position in our lives, wouldn't eating also lose its magic? Wouldn't our taste buds retire in time? Wouldn't the whole culture built on food lose its grasp and get wiped away in a few decades? After all, the wisdom that says an apple a day keeps the doctor away is only meaningful when an apple a day actually does keep the doctor away. What if the same is true for being social? What if these so-called vital reasons to make and keep friendships is on the verge of losing their grasp? What if the reason why we are getting more and more alienated towards each other is because the concept of human friendship is itself alienating, and we have only recently started affording to notice that? What if there is nothing wrong with us, personally or socially, and this loneliness that's going rampant all throughout the world is not something that we have to fight, but make peace with and accept as it is? What if it's just part of the process? Life is changing fast. And the faster it changes, the pace that the change occurs is also getting faster. Advancements in technology are so vast that they are basically exponential at this point. Age gap between generations has reduced to 4 years now. Life is changing so fast that it is literally impossible to understand somebody who is born only 4 years later than you were. Soon after something is on, it is old. Life is changing so fast that our understanding of it is lagging behind immensely. Let's think about what life looked like 100 years ago. First, urban life wasn't a norm. Most people lived in villages. In the rural setting, it is not possible to talk about boundaries or personal space. Families were large, and not everybody in a family had a spare room. People had to share their times, all days and all nights, all together. In a village, therefore, there are no individuals, there are families. Lives are intermingled, and life is a shared experience. City life, which started becoming a norm only in 2000s, on the other hand, is cold. Furthermore, the more developed the city is, the less connected its dwellers are. People have their personal spaces, and there are good sides and bad sides to it. Advantages are out there. You are free. You can live your life the way you want. Nobody asks you who that girl or boy was last night. Nobody asks you where you have been and why you aren't still married. You don't have to talk to anybody if you don't feel like. There is nobody to perform for. The city leaves you alone. The problems, on the other hand, are also there. Nobody knows you. Nobody cares about you. Nobody asks you questions. The city leaves you alone.
Nobody wants to help!
From this historical perspective, the loneliness that is born out of big city life is a new phenomenon. We aren't used to it. It feels awkward. It feels as if there is something wrong. We feel loneliness so deep that it depresses us. Lack of a social circle rips our sense of security, leaving us anxious and uncertain. In order to fight loneliness, we can even welcome addictions and leave our self-respect behind. Toxic relationships are there to alleviate our loneliness. Having nobody that looks like somebody seems better than having nobody that looks like nobody. If you are not fed with a spoon, you get used to licking the knife. This is a well-documented behavior among infants. If a child doesn't get enough attention from his caretakers, it starts provoking them. Abuse is also attention, albeit negative. Indeed, we are social creatures. We'd rather be beaten down than not being touched at all. We'd rather be yelled at than not being spoken to. This unfortunate preference of course carries itself into the adulthood. For instance, it's not a coincidence that affiliation with a gang is much more common among boys that grew up without a father figure, and childhood pregnancy follows the same trend among women that grew up without a father. What is missed in all these statistics is that the fatherlessness is not about father himself. When there is no father, mother has to work a lot more, leaving the kids alone, and when she's back, she's already tired to spend time with the kids. Therefore, a fatherless home is also a motherless home. So what these kids are running away from through gangs or toxic relationships is loneliness. Fatherless families present a new kind of parenting where interpersonal interaction is minimal. This might seem tragic, but when put on a historical perspective, it is just one step ahead from nuclear families, where there are no grandparents, uncles, or aunts around, and quite a few siblings are present. Nuclear families were already a step ahead from extended families, which were a norm in the rural settings. In a house in a village, there used to be always somebody that a person in a family could talk to all day, even when they want to stay alone. From this perspective, it's really hard to talk about a crisis in family. The situation rather seems like the concept of family is getting more and more narrow, leaving the infants no chance yet to accept loneliness in their lives. The crisis, as it seems, stems from the fact that we don't know how to deal with this much loneliness, and there aren't too many role models to follow when it comes to being isolated. All the fiction that revolves around loneliness display lonely people as problematic individuals. They all struggle with mental problems and end up being a menace to the society. Facing the idea that we might end up being one of them if we are left too much isolated is so frightening that we can be eager to implement some radical solutions. Interpersonal addictions, or the toxic relationships as they are notoriously referred to, is just one way to fight loneliness. Having somebody in our lives that we don't trust or love, neither trusts us or loves us, but just uses and abuses us, confronts and belittles us, limits us, nags and gaslights us, somehow seems more favorable than being alone. Apart from the toxic relationships, the other way that you can use to run away from loneliness is much more subtle, yet even more problematic. That way is belonging to a group and merging with the group identity. One great movie that successfully portrays this way is Ari Aster's 2019 horror movie, Midsommar. In the movie, we watch Danny, an anxious American university student, in an unfulfilling relationship with a boy called Christian. It's not a downright toxic relationship, but he wants to leave her, but cannot talk about it. When she suddenly loses all her family, she notices that her boyfriend is not there to be with her while she's grieving. Having no friends or family around, Danny is stuck with a boyfriend who isn't there to listen to her, but has to act like listening to her just to be kind. In the middle of all this, they are invited to a Swedish midsummer festival in a rural town in Sweden. This rural community seems warm, welcoming, and full of empathy, finally introducing the lost in life Danny and us, viewers, into a breakthrough from the lonely and modern America and the American curse of loneliness to a rural Swedish town of warmth and belonging. In the second half of the movie, however, we understand that this warm town is not as it seems. The community inside is a violent and bizarre pagan cult. I don't want to spoil the movie for those who are lucky enough to not having watched it yet. Just go and watch it, it's a brilliant movie. Cults, gangs, and terrorist organizations, they feed on this war against loneliness. A soul crushed by loneliness, anxiously looking for a way out, is a moth to a flame when introduced to a seemingly welcoming group. It doesn't take too much of an effort to convince this newcomer into the new realities that the new group asserts. Newcomers will be inclined towards ignoring all the mischievous ideas and behaviors that the group presents, and as time goes by, they will start accepting and defending and even acting that way. From this viewpoint, it's not really hard to understand how somebody can turn into a suicide bomber, ready to give his or her life for the sake of the group ideology. People do not get brainwashed because they are uneducated or poorly trained. They are brainwashed because they are afraid of being left out. Values like individualism and critical thinking are traded for a sense of belonging. Nations aren't too far away from gangs either. With all its justifications, disruptions, violence, and fabrications, the process of nation building is, in a way, reproducing an attachment that is lost. According to British Czech philosopher Ernest Gellner, nationalism was popularized among intellectuals as a middle ground between the brave world, the cold, scientific, individualistic society, and the old world, the fully collectivistic and mostly irrational rural populism. Intellectuals of the 20th century were too individualistic to root in a rural society, but not individualistic enough to live without roots either. Nationalism appeared as a hideaway from both. It served to merge the rural and urban conflict in politics. Belonging to a nation was ideal for those who are stuck in between, because unlike a village and a village people, a nation is not real. It is just a fantasy, but that fantasy is shared by thousands, even millions of people. That's why the Irish political scientist Benedict Anderson called the nation an imagined community. When this urban minority called the intellectuals started sharing their fantasies about our people through printed materials in the 19th century, their people did not know that they were, in fact, their people. They didn't even speak the same language with them. Lingual unification is a 100-year process. There were hardly any common cultural values or an understanding about who they are and where they belong to. Forced public education and prevalence of newspapers taught people what to speak, what to eat, what to drink, or where to belong. Benedict Anderson dates the birth of the nations to the emergence of print capitalism. Without the school textbooks or newspaper, it was basically not possible to create a sense of unity. People in a village only belonged to their village. They didn't even have something to do with the people in the neighboring village, let alone thousands and millions of people far away. Süreyya Aydemir, a Turkish historian who served as a military officer in the Ottoman army during the First World War, tells a story about his mass-drafted soldiers in his memoir, The Man Searching for Water. Being an educated urban military officer who came across with the uneducated rural people of the battlefield for the first time, he wants to get to know them. He asks them the most foundational questions of identity. What's our religion? Waiting for the answer, Muslim for sure, he is shocked to hear everyone stating the sect they belong to. People identified with their local identities. The idea of Ummah, the brotherhood of Muslims, was too far-fetched for them. They didn't think of themselves as Muslims. He then asks, then who is our prophet? Again, waiting for the answer, of course Muhammad, he gets a wide range of answers. One even gives the name of the army commander-in-chief. In the military school, Süreyya was taught that the most important aspect of his nation was their belief in Islam. The truth was, on the other hand, they didn't even know what they believed in. He then asks them about their nation, and again perplexed to hear different answers instead of Turks. Eventually he asks, aren't we all Turks? And the soldiers react as if he said something nasty. They didn't accept being Turkish, he says. But we were Turkish. This army was Turkish army, and we were fighting for the Turkish cause. What Aydemir's been through is basically disappointment. While getting his military education in the capital city, he had to memorize all the glorious tales about his nation. He learned all the details about its geography, the cultural ties they shared, and marched along with the marches about what a great nation they were. He was expecting the same excitement when he met with the soldiers for the first time, but all he got was ordinary people who didn't know they were part of a nation, let alone the nation they were part of was a great one. A great movie depicting how our imagination about a society doesn't fit the truth about it is Lars von Trier's 2003 movie Dogville. An urban, educated girl called Grace, running away from gangsters, takes a refuge in a village called Dogville. In the movie, the village is brilliantly portrayed as a great platform with chalk marks on it. It's not a movie set that looked like a village. There are geometrical chalk marks on the ground that says with a text, a house or a store. The movie is screaming us that where Grace is thinking she is, a village that is heartwarming, welcoming, full of peaceful people ready to be in solidarity with her, is not really there. She expects the hands of the village people to raise to hug her and give her a pat, but they are there raising to her to abuse her, to beat her, and to rape her. Her people, as it turns out, are not her people, but just people. Nationalism, this urban intellectual desire to root into an imagined community to run away from loneliness, was a deep fantasy. You're not alone, the fantasy said. There are millions of people just like you in this country, ready to get to know you, to side with you and march along with you. They live like you, eat like you, speak like you, and think like you. This was a soothing image, to say the least, if you are thinking like that and sharing the same fantasy. If you didn't, however, because you had another dream to begin with, or if you couldn't, even worse, because you belong to a minority group that shared a different fantasy, then you belong to see the other side of the moon. What you are going to face at this point is a well-known and well-documented mechanism called scapegoating. Not being able or not being eager to share this fantasy means that you are the reason that this fantasy is a fantasy, or so people start acting like that. After all, if there are really millions and millions of people that lived, spoke, ate, drank, and thought the same way, and ready to march along for the same cause all together, then why are those people separated and weak? There must be a reason for that. Keeping this fantasy of solidarity intact requires traitors. There must be some people to blame, to banish, to exterminate even. So what is the dream to some is a nightmare to others. Deeper, this fantasy of being part of a great nation fails to adjust to the reality, as in the case of countries going through economic crisis or lost wars, the worse the others are treated. Scapegoating is not a byproduct of nationalism. It's an ancient practice, a natural consequence of solidarity. As Homo sapiens, we needed scapegoats ever since we started living together in groups. Here's a black pill to swallow. As a species, we are not living together because we love each other. We came together in the first place because we wanted to increase our chance to survive, so that we did not go extinct. The fear towards nature, our first and foremost enemy, and another fear to be left alone to its will, have been the dominant forces that connecting people in the first place. Survival has been, and it still is, our most basic, most fundamental instinct. We can do and we have done anything in order to survive. For the French philosopher René Girard, scapegoating is the same exact mechanism some pagan societies operated with: human sacrifice. Sacrificed humans in these societies were never at fault. They were not criminals nor rebels. The reason they were chosen to be killed in a ceremony and not the others was totally arbitrary. Somebody had to be killed so that the gods could grant peace and abundance to the society they lived in, the people believed. Girard notices the same mechanism at work when it comes to scapegoating. None of the famous, well-known scapegoats in history were really at fault. Be it Jesus Christ or King Oedipus, it's kind of easy to see why the political power threw them under the bus. But it's impossible to comprehend why the ordinary people were so angry at them, thinking that punishing them would satisfy the needs of the gods. For them, being a part of this sadistic lynch was almost a religious ceremony, a transcendental act of worship, and it is impossible to make sense of it. Same is true for scapegoat dynamics in autocratic families, where one child is praised all the time and another child is blamed for all the troubles the family encounters. The whole family acts as if they are united against one child. The siblings, the parents, the extended family, and even the neighbors bully the kid as a reverence to the family. Meanwhile, why the praised child is praised and blamed child is blamed, there is no eligible reason. The praised child is praised because somebody has to be praised. Blamed child is blamed because somebody has to be blamed. This is a rule that nobody criticizes but just obeys. According to Girard, one has to be blamed for everything in a society so that everybody in a society isn't blamed for something. So the reason behind scapegoating is basic economics. This explains why in the Christian belief system, Jesus dies because of our sins. One has to be isolated and punished so that the rest can stand themselves. Gustave Le Bon, a 19th century French intellectual who studied the revolutionary movements all throughout the history, came out with this conclusion: a group identity is so overbearing that it is practically impossible to say no once you belonged. A person can be kind and peaceful but will not hesitate to jump forward to throw another stone once the lynch begins. A group is as peaceful as its least peaceful member. It doesn't matter if this group shares this or that ideology, nor does it matter if this group is a tribe, a cult, a terrorist organization, a revolutionary force, a nation, a friend group, a football hooligan group, or a family. Once you belong, you're not you. You are part of it.
One of us, okay? That's one of us. Google gobble, one of us. We accept that one of us. Google gobble, one of us.
Hannah Arendt, a German-American historian and philosopher who coined the term the banality of evil in her famous book Eichmann in Jerusalem, points out to the fact that the reason why people do enact horrendous mischiefs such as the Nazi regime did, and why the majority of people downright agree with or just turn a blind eye to these acts in these societies, like unfortunately most of the German people did in that era, was not because they were evil personally. They were ordinary people who just wanted to keep their attachments, even if what they attached to was corrupt to its core. They were just afraid to be left out no matter what. Belonging in corruption seemed more preferable than standing alone in integrity. If belonging required to inform the government that your neighbors, the same people that you spent your childhood with, were Jewish and sending them to their death and destruction, so be it. Siding with the bully and blaming the victim is an automatic defense mechanism that we all have built inside us. We aren't built to prioritize justice and tolerance. We are built to prioritize whatever we think keeps us safe. In times of conflict and disagreement, if somebody has to pay the price, it's rather be you than me. This is how we all work, and this is where scapegoating roots. All in all, running away from loneliness always has a price. If you're not paying it right now, it means that somebody else is paying for you, and you are only waiting for your turn. You can never guarantee that it will not be you who will be sacrificed next year. Or from the same token, you cannot guarantee that your neighbors will resist the authority when they come for you to put you into the concentration camp. Being innocent, hardworking, or virtuous will not save you from being scapegoated. In order to be us, there has to be a them. And that's it. Nothing personal. In order to be together, some things have to be separate. Again, nothing personal if you are the one who is separated. The way to love partially is the way to hate partially. It's a game of love me not. Scapegoating, therefore, is not a misunderstanding nor an exception. It is a required sacrifice, an offspring of group dynamics, a side effect of our antidote to loneliness. Somebody who gets alienated from the society, therefore, is neither crazy nor stupid. To the contrary, alienation is the result of sanity. Society, with all its injustice, blame, madness, hysteria, repression, manipulation, and sadistic violence that it performs, would make every sane person go alienated. We are afraid of staying sane, so we gaslight ourselves because not being able to be a part of the society is threatening. We are inclined towards believing that there is something wrong with somebody who is alienated, even if that person is ourselves. Having been a social animal for centuries, the capacity to scapegoat somebody has become our second nature. And our nature starts working against us when we are the one who is alienated. We are afraid, we get anxious, because we know that we are in danger. The alienated, and therefore the scapegoated one, is the only one that sees the truth. And unlike the idea that says scapegoat is scapegoated because he or she sees the truth, scapegoat sees the truth because he or she is scapegoated. While the people who could belong only saw the bright side of the society, united, attached, caring, and loving, the scapegoat also sees the shadow side of it. Dog-eat-dog, unconcerned, interest-oriented, full of hate and fear. Some even call this phenomenon the epistemological privilege of the victim, meaning that the one who is victimized is the only one who is privileged enough to see the dark side of the society. This is why most of us would rather stay ignorantly social than being dangerously lonely. As Emil Cioran, a Romanian philosopher, noticed, we all are imposters. That's why we endure each other. Our fear of being left alone makes each of us silent partners in crime. Consequently, although saying that people are getting more and more lonely because of the technological advancements or rapid urbanization or neoliberalism, and that we are losing our good old sense of belonging, might seem dark at first, the reality is much more darker. The reality is that the loneliness is our prime position, but we have been too afraid to face that. That we are not more lonely, but more courageous. That if we are less encouraged to make friends, to keep friendships, to be involved into social groups, to have families, to set up new families, and stay away from relationships altogether, it might be because we have just started affording being lonely. Maybe it's all because we don't have to endure each other anymore. We can finally embrace loneliness instead of running away from it constantly. And while running away, knocking everything and everybody down on our way blindly. Maybe there is nothing wrong with us. Maybe we are just waking up to the reality that things have been wrong all along. And this seemingly darkest position is actually Hegelian position. For the German philosopher, alienation is not a personal problem that needs to be dealt with, but a way leading to freedom. If you're not alienated from your family, you can never leave them to start your own. If you're not alienated from your workplace, you can never leave that to find a better job. Alienation is that inner voice we all have that says,
"Please, tell me about the fucking golf shoes."
But instead of listening to it and taking it seriously, we feel like suppressing it. What we call social anxiety, for example, can actually be social alienation. We get a hint of how the society works and what is expected of us in order to be able to be attached to it, and we just want a way out, and that feels a little bit disorienting. However, instead of listening to that disturbing little inner voice and running after the freedom it calls us to approach, we call it a problem and try to medicate it. Hegel takes his position that connects alienation to freedom to its furthest point. If you want to get creative, you have to look at yourself from outside. That is, you have to be alienated even from your own existence. Being able to come up with a unique, authentic position towards what is one definition of creativity. One who doesn't pay attention to that disturbing feeling that says there is something wrong in society, in reality, in everything basically, that something isn't the way it is presented, doesn't see the point of creating something new. If everything is already given, and if everything is okay the way they are, what is there to create after all? Karl Marx, the famous German post-Hegelian philosopher, saw the pathway to revolution starting from the workers alienating to the work they do, thus noticing that they were being exploited, and eventually looking for a way out. All the progressive movements, be it the anti-slavery movement to women emancipation movement, was born out of alienation. Every change starts with the idea that there is something wrong. Society, with its language and its norms, works as a security net that wraps everything around and defines the truth. Everybody, in a way, lives in a Truman Show, seeing only what the society wants them to see and thinking that it's all there is. Everything is, this way or another, limited, defined, and constructed. Everywhere you look, you see a given and accepted definition. Friends are good. We all belong to each other. Loneliness is bad. There is something wrong if you stand out. You have to do this. Stay away from that. Turn yourself into an X and make Y. That's life. And if you aren't living that way, you better start now. Accepting what is given as the truth is the opposite of creativity and freedom, but it is safe. Freeing yourself from the given definitions of what is and what should be is the only way forward. From the Hegelian viewpoint, therefore, loneliness is freedom and attachment is regression. Because all communities are corrupt to its core, you have to ignore your truth and repress it in order to be attached. Being able to belong is therefore a dirty trait where you exchange your truth and your creativity in exchange for a little bit of safety. And most people gladly take and have taken this trait because fear is one of the most dominant forces in us, perhaps the most dominant one. The real reason why we live in a society memes are funny is because blaming people as if you're not part of them is cringy. We tend to think that we are the good guy in the story. When you notice how people act in crowds, the first thought that pops into your mind is, I'm not one of them. This is yet another fallacy. the darkest truth about who we are always remains in our blind spot. We don't notice when we act like a bully. When we are confronted about how we acted, we either have forgotten it, haven't noticed it, or justify it. This is why this part of our personality is called the shadow in the Jungian analysis, because wherever we turn, it's always behind. Even if we were scapegoated and bullied by our family, it doesn't mean we will not scapegoat or bully another person in another group setting. It is, in fact, quite the opposite. School bullies are usually the ones who were scapegoated and bullied by their families. We see the truth partially and ignore the rest of it. The problem is not with the people. Problem is not personal at all. It is systemic. And by the system, I don't necessarily mean the capitalistic system or the patriarchal system. The laws followed by the crowds are inescapable. Truth is, we are not better than anybody else. We are all in this together. Facing your shadow will not make you less of a bully. It will more likely make you aware that you are bullying people and that it is actually quite fun. Max Stirner, another German post-Hegelian philosopher, dealing with the social aspect of alienation, came up with an interesting solution to the problem of society: the union of egoists. He calls all the glorified values that supposedly bring and keep a community together, be it the duty, the humanity, the good, the God, or the nation, the spooks. He points out to the fact that every community is indeed a hierarchical structure, and all the spooks are there to fool the rest into serving whoever is at top. Patriotism is not for the sake of the people, it is for the king. Piety is not for the sake of God, it is for the priest. While a community seems proud of its members' altruism and devotion, the people at its top are as egoistical as they can be. Stirner advocates questioning, what is my interest? Let's forget all these self-fulfilling values. They are frauds, manipulation basically, spooks, ghosts. Let's talk about the truth. If I'm going to be part of something, I should be getting some sort of benefit from it. You're getting the best of it, a sense of belonging, love, and approval. You are doing the right thing by being a part of us. No, that's manipulation. Where is my money? I cannot come to work because I love my company, or just because working is a value that gives meaning to my life. If I'm here, you have to pay for it. I'm refusing to close my eyes just to belong. I'm not keeping my mouth shut just for attachment. I don't care if you like me or not. I can help you if you help me. According to Stirner, only when everybody starts acting in this egoistical, self-serving way, we can start generating social structures that aren't based on manipulation. Danish theologian and philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said, anxiety is dizziness of freedom. At one point or another, we all notice that the so-called realities that are binding us and keeping us in check are not real. That's the point where anxiety sets in. This dizziness is the natural reaction. It is what you should feel when you notice that your possibilities are infinite. They always have been and they always will be. Kierkegaard calls this anxiety-ridden experience education. For Kierkegaard, there are two ways of education: being educated by the finite, that is, being adjusted to the norms and realities created by the society, the so-called normalcy, and being educated by the possibility, that is, choosing the path that is not followed by the most, the path to freedom. In this idea, anxiety is a great teacher that teaches you, if you let it, that you are not supposed to be who you are told to be. first option seems to be the correct answer, but it shouldn't be forgotten that there are advantages as well as disadvantages to every choice we make. To quote Kierkegaard, "Whoever is educated by possibility is exposed to danger, not that of getting into bad company and going astray in various ways, as are those educated by the finite, but in danger of a fall, namely suicide." If at the beginning of education he misunderstands the anxiety, so that it doesn't lead him to fate but away from fate, then he's lost. On the other hand, whoever is educated by possibility remains with anxiety. He doesn't permit himself to be deceived by its countless falsification and accurately remembers the past. Then the assaults of anxiety, even though they be terrifying, will not be such that he flees from them. For him, anxiety becomes a serving spirit that against his will leads him where he wishes to go. In the end, the fact that less and less people want to show up in the social game doesn't necessarily mean that there is something inherently wrong with us. Briefly, what I'm saying is, the reason why we don't buy it anymore is not because we can't afford it, but we can. I think loneliness is exactly where we need to stay for some time. I think alienation is where we need to start anew. I think anxiety is not something that we should run away from, but appoint as our teacher. I think anxiety, loneliness, and alienation aren't here to bring us destruction, but a relief, a sense of freedom and creativity, and all the required tools for us to create new ways of connection. And hopefully, unlike the old ones that were forced and abusive, these new ways will be fulfilling and genuine. Senle beraber olsak da sevgilim, hiç görmesek birbirimizi, özlesek, ömür boyu bağlansak da, sevinsek de, üzülsek de, yalnızlık ömür boyu. Senle beraber olsak da sevgilim, ayrılsak da, ölsek de, bu yolda hep yalnızlık yavrum, yalnızlık ömür boyu. Yalnızlık ömür boyu. Birden sen gelsen aklıma, seni unutsam bazı meraklansam gizlice, delice kıskansam seni, hep yalnızlık var sonunda. Yalnızlık